Hi everyone, Seth from Guardian Angel IT here. In this lesson, we'll be covering the top cybersecurity threats facing small businesses today. So let's get started. Before we talk about specific threats, it's helpful to get a high level understanding of why small businesses might be targeted. Many small business owners and entrepreneurs think, I'm too small to target, or there isn't much risk now, I'll wait to act until my company is a little bigger and we have more time and money to invest. The thing is, we've seen the smallest businesses get taken down. We've had freelance customers come to us after getting ransomed. They only had one computer to protect and maybe one or two logins. There were so many things that they could have done with little or no money that could have prevented or at least substantially mitigated the attack. But the fact is that most small businesses invest almost no time or money or even thought into improving their security posture. And attackers know it. They're well aware that the defense at many small businesses is virtually non existent. If you're a small business owner and you're thinking, this is bad, I'm not doing a great job, you should know that 20 years ago, it wasn't just small businesses that basically lacked any kind of defense. It was big businesses and governments too. Remember all those cases of kids hacking their way into the DoD or big corporations back in the 90s and early 2000s? They weren't hacking, not really. They were just scanning IP addresses and finding places where they could log in with default credentials like admin for the username and password. Believe it or not, even the US government didn't do a great job of tightening up security until after repeatedly getting hacked by kids and amateurs. Today, the situation is different. The attackers are much more skilled, but governments and big businesses have also upped their game. They can still be hacked, but it takes a lot more skill, time, and patience. But most small businesses are still unprotected. So that's why they're good targets. Because the better targets, like big companies, are all harder to attack. Next, it's important to realize that the end goal of an attack may not be your own business. Sometimes you might be targeted as a means toward getting closer to one of your customers, partners, or suppliers. There's a lot that an attacker can do if they get access to just one of your email accounts. Of course, they can sit and listen, gather information, and then leverage what they learn to achieve greater control over your organization. But they can also impersonate you and send convincing emails to someone that you communicate with. Imagine how convincing a phishing email is if it comes, essentially mid conversation, from someone that you email regularly. There's a really good chance that you'd click a link or download a document without even thinking twice about it. Finally, small businesses underestimate their own value. We've seen cases where freelancers have been ransomed for thousands of dollars. It's a really bad feeling when you wake up in the morning to find out that you've been hacked. How much would you pay to get your business back immediately? The first threat that we're going to cover is credential attacks. This is an umbrella term for many kinds of attacks that typically involve weak or compromised credentials. What we're actually talking about here typically is using weak passwords, reusing those often weak passwords, and not using multi factor authentication or MFA. Another common mistake is not changing passwords after a data breach. If you're in the US, chances are your data has been breached in one way or another. So, this is a very real threat because most ordinary people use the same password for everything, and there's a good chance that someone can just go look it up. Regardless, having weak authentication practices is basically the worst thing that any small business can do in terms of cybersecurity. And I really want to hammer this point home. If you're using weak passwords, reusing passwords, or not using MFA, there's nothing that can be done to get your security posture to an even moderately strong point. It's like trying to build a house on sand without a foundation. The whole structure is just going to crack the first time the ground shifts. It helps to understand what the actual threats are, so we can see why this is so important. If you're using a weak password, it can be easily brute forced. Brute forcing simply means trying different passwords until access is granted. MFA also stops brute forcing in its tracks, or makes it much more difficult at least. Password spraying is similar to brute forcing, but the attacker uses common or passwords that are likely to be used at your organization, like fall 2025 or your organization's name followed by a number. Password spraying is more effective the larger an organization is. Credential theft is a more general term that includes other things, like someone buying your password from someone else. For example, whenever a data breach happens, bad actors get to work and try to sell as many credentials as they can to make some money. Next, if a threat actor does successfully get your password, then they might immediately be able to access your accounts if you don't have MFA enabled. They can try to take that account over and even lock you out and ransom access to it, or try to extort money from you. On a slightly more technical side, once an attacker gains access to anything, they will always try to leverage that access for more. Mm. Having weak authentication practices can easily enable an attacker to move laterally across your network, gaining access to multiple computers and any databases or servers you have. This happens all the time, and one of the most common reasons is that people reuse their passwords in different locations. You can be sure that if an attacker finds one working password, they're going to try it everywhere else at your organization, including other computers, other applications, and other users. They'll try every username and password combination they can to expand their control over your assets. They can also potentially escalate privileges, which means accessing an administrative account, or at least an account with more privileges than the one that they already have access to. The goal of an attacker is always to gain admin access, and ultimately, to get admin access across the network and fully compromise the entire organization. One particularly common example that quickly leads to this is the practice of using the same local admin password on computers across the network. This used to be the standard even at large companies, but an attacker can quickly gain admin access to one computer and then leverage this to compromise the entire network. Now, I know that I just threw a lot at you. You don't need to understand everything. The real point here is that it's very important to use strong, unique passwords and multi factor authentication. Now that we have some idea about the importance of using strong authentication practices, let's take a closer look at how to actually implement them. Before even starting to set up strong passwords, we recommend starting to use a password manager. In our small business cybersecurity course, tasks 1 and 2 are about performing inventories. In task 3, we set up a password manager. We've actually split up using a password manager into two tasks to make it easier. Task 3 is about the initial setup of a password manager, and task 4 is about using your inventories along with the password manager to systematically generate, store, and manage super strong passwords with ease. Take a look at the screenshot on the left of the slide, which shows Bitwarden's browser extension. You can see that Bitwarden is being used to generate a strong passphrase consisting of 6 words. If you look at the bottom, you can see that you can easily access your vault, which is where all of your passwords are stored. I wanted to show you how Bitwarden works so that you can see just how easy it is. So if you're going through this course, by the time you finish task 4, you will have stored your passwords into a password manager of your choice, and you'll have a much stronger security posture than what you started with. In terms of using strong passwords, length is really the most important factor. Randomness can also help, but a shorter random password is much weaker than a slightly longer, less random password. That's why we recommend using passphrases rather than traditional passwords. Not only are they easy to remember, they're easier to type too. If you look again at the image on the slide, you can see that we're using Bitwarden to easily generate a super strong passphrase that's 42 characters long. At that length, this password is basically uncrackable even with a dedicated cracking rig. But it's actually surprisingly easy to remember because it's just 6 words. If you did have to manually type this in every day, you'd probably memorize it within a week. And it's really easy to type because it consists of words, not random characters. After you've set up all your accounts using strong passwords, the next thing to do is to enable multi factor authentication everywhere you can. Most logins today support MFA, so it should be possible to protect all or most of your important accounts with it. If you do things step by step as we outline later in this course, you won't be reusing any of your passwords because you will have independently generated each of them using the password manager. but it bears mentioning that using unique passwords is one of the most important factors as well. At any rate, if you're following along with the course, task 5 is using MFA, just after using your password manager to generate and store strong passwords. The first threat that we covered is credential attacks, which, as we saw, involves using weak passwords, not using MFA, etc. But a lot of the time, attackers don't need to get your credentials at all. Phishing attacks use social engineering, like sending you seemingly innocent or compelling emails to get you to take some action on their behalf. So, phishing and similar attacks get around having to acquire a set of credentials to gain initial access and instead trick you into giving them that access. Phishing and related attacks, like business email compromise or BEC, are the most common ways that hackers get into our devices and networks. And they're pretty simple to understand. The goal is to get you to do something that gives them access to a computer, an account, or a set of credentials. This includes convincing you to click a malicious link, download malware, or enter login information into a fake page that's cloned from a real one. An important thing to realize about these attacks is that they work really well because they're behavior based. Traditional defenses, like antivirus and a firewall, won't typically help. They usually aren't installing malware, at least not at this stage, so most of the time there isn't even anything for antivirus to detect. Since you're the one clicking the link, your firewall is not going to have any way of knowing that you just potentially let a hacker onto your device or into your network. They also leverage compelling social engineering, and they're becoming more sophisticated over time. Attackers today are doing more and more research on their targets and using advanced techniques. A phishing email today looks a lot better than it used to, and we can expect that trend to continue. Check out the real life phishing email on the right. It comes from an email address that seems valid, it's super professional, and it's very well designed. This isn't even a targeted spear phishing email. There's a lot of people in the US who get emails from Home Depot. I do. This email just doesn't seem suspicious in any way. Note that there's a big call to action button, just like in a real Home Depot email. There are probably other links embedded into this email too. Once you click on a link in a phishing email, what happens next depends on the type of attack. Some are designed to automatically download malware onto your computer. Some will trigger a direct connection to an attacker's computer. Others may direct you to a login page that looks perfect because it's literally cloned from the original page's HTML source. So, some attacks won't require you to do anything other than click the link. Others will want you to log in, and obviously, then they can use the login information that you provided. Other attacks focus on stealing authentication cookies or session tokens, meaning that the attacker will be able to use your account without having to get your password. We've talked about phishing emails like the one on this slide, but there are other kinds of phishing attacks too. The original phishing attacks are characterized by targeting multiple or many people at once, and the emails that they send would usually be pretty easy to spot due to things like grammar or spelling errors. Classic email based attacks are still the most common, but they aren't the only ones. First, spear phishing is becoming more popular. This is when an attacker really digs in, does some research on you and your organization, and engages in a targeted campaign to try and phish one person or one organization. A spear phishing email generally looks really good. Next is vishing, or voice phishing. This means phishing over the phone. In a lot of ways, this is similar to phone based scams, where they try to use social engineering to get you to do something. There's also smishing, which is text message based phishing. And finally, we have quishing, which is QR code based phishing. This one is particularly scary to me. How often do we use QR codes in daily life? They're everywhere you look, and they're really just links. When you scan a QR code, it's exactly like clicking a link, and we can't seem to get away from them. I've noticed recently that, especially in big cities, it's become really popular for restaurants to encourage customers to use QR codes. Some don't even have physical menus anymore. Hopefully, the last slide scared you just a little. It's probably a good thing to be wary of links, QR codes, and even text messages. But we aren't defenseless, and we don't need to only rely on our own judgment. There are a lot of things that can help prevent phishing and mitigate the effects of an attack if we do accidentally click a malicious link. We just need to up our game. I'll go over each of these tips, but just keep in mind that even though this might seem a little overwhelming right now, we will cover each of these in detail in this course. So if you stick with it, not only will you learn the theory behind each one, but you'll also learn how to deploy each of these defensive steps in our task-based lessons. Here are some great defensive tips. First of all, pretty much anything in this course will help. You're already improving your security posture by educating yourself. Second, stop clicking all the links. You should be wary of them. The best and often easiest way to spot a malicious link is by looking at the domain. Third, use multi factor authentication and never ever reuse passwords. When you use MFA, even if they get your password, they still may not be able to actually access your account. If you aren't reusing your password, then they can't access any other accounts using the same credentials. Fourth, deploy DNS based filtering across your organization. DNS based security provides a powerful security layer at a really low price or even for free. Fifth, your organization needs a program to keep all of your systems patched and vulnerability free. Patching and updates shouldn't be done randomly. Someone needs to be in charge of doing them and do them regularly, at least once a week. We recommend using remote monitoring and management software or RMM to do this, or hire someone. Again, this can actually be done very cheaply or even for free, but note that free options do require some expertise to do correctly. The next one is really important, which is managed detection and response. We'll go over in detail different types of detection and response. The classic example is EDR, or endpoint detection and response. MDR refers to EDR that's managed for you. We highly recommend MDR to small businesses for two reasons. The first is that it's the absolute best way to catch malicious things happening on your devices and in your network. The second is that EDR takes a specialized cybersecurity team to properly configure and use. It generates a lot of logs that need to be sifted through and thoroughly investigated by a skilled team. At any rate, EDR and MDR are used by virtually every medium sized to large companies around the world and is, in most cases, the best way for SMBs to catch phishing in action and stop the attackers before it's too late. Without MDR, you'll probably never know that they're there. Next, we have SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, which are three email authentication standards that work together to protect your domain from spoofing and phishing attacks. These sound complicated, but they're actually pretty simple to do. They can often be done for free, or you can pay a company, typically a few dollars per month, to have these managed for you. One nice thing is that these function at the domain level. Basically, thebusiness.com or whatever your website/domain is. If you set these up, they will protect every single user on your domain and prevent all spoofing using your domain. They also have benefits in terms of email marketing, as Google has announced that they will eventually ban emails from domains that don't have these protections set up. Next is cybersecurity training. We recommend that you do this annually at least. Finally, email based spam filters can also help with email based phishing specifically. Some cybersecurity companies would put this at the top of the list, but in our opinion, they can be expensive because you pay a per user price. And they don't help with anything other than specifically email based phishing, versus the other things that we've talked about will help protect you against many types of, or even all, attacks. The third and final threat that we'll cover is ransomware and extortion attacks. These types of attacks commonly target small businesses because the goal of the attack is purely financial. There are also threats that occur during the end stage of an attack. What I mean by that is that the goal of credential attacks, phishing, and lots of other attacks is eventually to get access to your systems and sell that access, sell your data, install ransomware, or extort the victim. So, if we think about the first two threats that we covered from the attacker's perspective, credential attacks and phishing can both be used to gain initial access and improve their control over your business assets and network. But ultimately, what most attackers really want to do is make money. And two of the most common ways that they do this is with ransomware or extortion. Now, just to be clear, these are two different attacks. And actually, there are a lot of different types of ransomware and different ways that you can be extorted. However, the effect as felt by the victim is basically the same, so we wanted to cover them together here. Let's start with ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that encrypts your data. Typically, once ransomware is installed, you won't be able to regain access to your data. Depending on the type of ransomware, you may see a screen like you see on the left of the slide here. This is very common. There will often be a timer and information on how to send a payment and potentially regain your data. Keep in mind that once you do make a payment, you may or may not actually get your data back. Since ransomware is a type of malware, defenses against malware will also work for ransomware. But, and we'll cover this a lot in this course, it's relatively easy for an attacker to create malware that flies under the radar. It's also important to realize that ransomware is a highly commodified industry. Often the people developing the ransomware aren't using it. They sell licenses to use it to other criminals. So, for their licenses to be worth something, the ransomware itself has to be pretty good. It has to be capable of avoiding most of the common defenses like antivirus and firewalls, or their own customers won't be able to ransom payments from their victims, and they won't have a reason to buy the license from the developers. So there's a lot of financial incentive for ransomware developers to continually improve their products, making them harder to detect, including better features for criminals and making them easier to use. Attacks involving extortion are broader because they don't necessarily need to involve malware at all. An attacker can simply gain access to your account and lock you out of it. If they gain access to a device with important or sensitive information, they may be able to exfiltrate that information from your system and delete the original copy. We've also seen more basic attacks where small business owners base their whole business in a Facebook account and don't have any backups of their contacts or other important information. Then an attacker gets access using a credential attack, probably using an old, leaked, or weak password, and locks them out of the Facebook account. With free services like Facebook, you don't actually own the data. Facebook does. And there isn't much incentive for them to help you out because you're not actually a paying customer. So it can be really difficult or impossible to regain access to an account like that. This story is just to show you that hacking often isn't like what it's shown to be in the movies. Even getting access to a social media account using an old password can be crippling to a business. When it comes to ransomware and extortion attacks, the best thing that we can do is to prevent them from happening in the first place. By the time an attack happens, it's probably too late. Sometimes they might be using old ransomware, and in any event that you do get a ransom notice, I definitely recommend going to the website nomoreransom.org. They actually have software that can detect the type of ransomware, and also depending on the type of ransomware, they have software that may be able to decrypt your data without you having to pay anything. The No More Ransom website is an initiative by the National High Tech Crime Unit of the Netherlands Police, Europol's European Cybercrime Center, Kaspersky, and McAfee all working together to try to mitigate the worldwide impact of ransomware. In most cases, you won't be able to decrypt your data, but it's definitely worth a shot. Let's get back to prevention. I've already mentioned that in order to install ransomware or extort you, the attacker needs to have gained access, usually administrative access, to your systems, applications, or data. So the great thing is that everything we've already covered in terms of defending ourselves against credential attacks and phishing will help tremendously. To recap, these include things like using strong passwords multi-factor authentication, DNS filtering, patch and update management, and some type of detection and response. Managed detection and response, or MDR, is really the best for most small businesses who don't have dedicated IT staff. In addition, because these types of attacks require administrative access, we want to deny that to the attackers using the principle of least privilege, also commonly known as least privilege access. What this means is that you should always be using accounts with the least privileges required. This is especially true for accounts that we use to browse the internet or check our emails with. Then, if an attacker gains access to that account, they won't automatically be in an administrative account and they won't be able to install ransomware. Here's a quick check. If you're currently logged into your computer using an admin account, then you're exposing yourself unnecessarily right now. Finally, when it comes to protecting critical data, backups are one of the most important protections. Having a backup won't prevent an attack, but as long as your backup isn't compromised, you should always be able to get your data back from the backup instead of having to pay the ransom. So, for critical systems like databases and servers, we always recommend having a backup. It's also a good idea to have a backup for critical machines because if something gets messed up, it's the best practice. When it comes to servers, a lot of senior administrators have the rule that one server equals no servers and two servers equals one. Many IT admins have had really bad days when they realize that they or someone else screwed something up on the only company server. Before we finish this video, I wanted to point out that this is just one small part of our full course, which can be found on our website. It's designed to help you improve your defenses step by step. The course contains two kinds of articles: informational articles to give you all of the background information that you may want or need about small business cybersecurity, and task based articles, where you roll up your sleeves and actually work on improving your business security posture. We'll be pairing our written articles with videos, and this video is part of that series. The course is a work in progress, and we expect to improve it quite a bit over time. Currently, there are about 20 informational articles and 13 tasks for you to complete. As we develop the course, you'll find a ton of resources, all centrally located and organized logically in the website. By watching this video, you're already using our course, and we hope that you gain something of real value by following it. You can find the full text and video course at guardianangelit.com/small-business-cybersecurity. Finally, if you've enjoyed this video and want to see more content, or to help us reach other small businesses, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really will help us to reach other small businesses who may be benefited by our course. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you next time.